back. You're watching Gravitas. Is the US military returning to Afghanistan? US Defense Secretary James Mattis hinted at that when he said that the US cannot deal with the Taliban, which has no respect for the ballot box. It has renewed speculation about a possible Indian military role in that country too. Here's a report.
We want peace.
ما با پاکستان صلح می‌خواهیم.
We want to be able to
ما می‌خواهیم که سر پاکستان اعتماد کرده بتوانیم. و ما می‌خواهیم که فرصت برای یک رابطه همکارانه باشد که باعث رشد هر دو کشورها و کاهش فقر در هر دو طرف شود. چالش همی هست متاسفانه که ما نمی‌تونیم بفهمیم.
Afghanistan's president addressing foreign diplomats just days after a truck bomb killed 150 people in Kabul's diplomatic area. Nobody claimed responsibility for the blast, but Afghan intelligence pointed the finger at the Haqqani network, whose chief Sirajuddin Haqqani is deputy chief of the Taliban and close to Pakistan intelligence. With summer setting in, the Taliban spring offensive has begun. Today, Taliban fighters contest the government for control over every province. Assessments say Ghani's army and the police barely control 60% of the country, which is why Defense Secretary James Mattis' comment has stirred speculation that the US is maybe planning an armed counter-terror strategy. General Mattis said, and I quote, "We're up against an enemy that knows they cannot win at the ballot box. That's why they use bombs, because ballots would ensure they would never have a role to play. The bottom line is with civilization to people who cannot win at the ballot box." Although a Pentagon official review of the Afghan war is pending, Mattis' remarks hints that the US could turn up the military heat on the Taliban. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson fueled the speculation when he warned the US would, quote, "never allow Pakistan to become a platform for terrorism to operate from," end quote. With about 8,000 troops deployed in Afghanistan, US military commanders may request another 3,000 to 5,000 troops. But those numbers are unlikely to succeed when 100,000 plus troops not so many years ago failed to defeat the Taliban. Which is why recent reports about India contributing 15,000 troops to Afghanistan has raised eyebrows. Apart from the cost, it's not clear what their role will be. Indian diplomats have dismissed the report, but sources say India will speed up the transfer of military equipment to Afghanistan. There could also be a scope for paying back Pakistan in its own coin. Bureau Report, WION.
And here's a snapshot of the conflict in Afghanistan. The US involvement in the Afghan conflict is now 16 years old. It began in 2001 when America invaded and threw out the Taliban dictatorship. The Iraq War saw US troops diverted there from Afghanistan. It gave the Taliban time to regroup, rearm with Pakistani support. The Americans have lost 3,000 troops in fighting the Taliban. 1 million Afghans have died. Thousands are displaced. The Taliban still control nearly 40% of the country. And India has been a major contributor to Afghanistan's reconstruction. In fact, India has given $2 billion in aid since the year 2001. Major projects include the Parliament building, the Salma Dam and an electricity substation for Kabul. India is also training Afghan civil servants and the Afghan army and police. Recently, Delhi supplied attack helicopters. Afghanistan is now demanding more weapons and equipment from India. Joining us is Zafar Mehdi, an Afghan journalist who's currently, I'm told, in Kashmir, and Glenn Carl, American writer and former intelligence officer from Massachusetts. Good evening to both of you. Zafar, let me come to you first. Another explosion being reported in Kabul. Apparently 7 people killed. We do not have any confirmed reports. What have you heard? And how tenuous is the situation on the ground?
Well, situation is very tense. As you can see, just last week we had the deadly attacks in Kabul, and it was like the highest number of civilian casualties in 1 week, like 1,000, more than 1,000 civilian casualties in just 1 week. So situation is tense. There are like the security forces are doing their bit, but they're not able to tackle the problems that are on the ground because insurgents have infiltrated across the city. and government has actually no answer right now, because just last week we saw a security breach. It was a major security breach, and within the government they are accusing each other of having moles, like insurgents have infiltrated into the system. So they really don't have answers right now. And what we are discussing is like America's longest war, which is also the biggest disaster, if we can look at it. Somehow Americans have always appeared confused about the role they have in Afghanistan. From counterterrorism when they started in 2001, and then they changed to counter narcotics, counterinsurgency, nation building. So they have tried everything without much luck, and right now they are assisting, advising, training Afghan forces, and Afghan forces are doing their bit. They are trying to protect civilians, but the problem of terrorism is so huge right now. The state-sponsored terrorism, if we can call it, President Ghani in the Kabul conference, made it very clear where terrorists are coming from, who are sponsoring them, who are supporting them, who are providing them arms. So the problem is deep, and it has to be tackled. Like regional cooperation is needed, regional coordination is needed, in which India has a role to play, and Pakistan has a major role to play, as President Ghani also mentioned, because the role of President Ghani said Afghanistan continues to make unconditional offer of state-to-state peace dialogue with Pakistan.
Right.
But they will not accept terrorism, or hosting of terrorism is an acceptable tool of diplomacy, as President Ghani mentioned.
Glenn, taking it forward from where Zafar Mehdi left, is America confused? What does one make of James Mattis' statements? Is America looking at another active role in the Afghan situation / conflict?
Well, one of probably the central problem that the U.S. has lived with respect to Afghanistan is largely the point that our colleague made. For years, it was unclear, has been unclear, what American policy is with respect to Afghanistan, or if it even has one. I recall one of the most heartbreaking experiences of my life was when I was still working. Special forces officers came to speak to me because I was responsible for terrorism and had worked on Afghanistan for many years. And they said, Mr. Carl, I'd like your explanation as to what our policy is in Afghanistan, because we have killed many people, and I would like to know why we're there. And I tried to punt because as an intelligence officer, I don't make policy. And they said, no, if anyone should know what we're doing, you should be the one, given your role. And the answer was we didn't really have a policy. It was to eliminate al-Qaeda, which was a coherent step, and then to keep al-Qaeda from being there, which is also coherent. But as Vice President Biden pointed out, in an Oval Office meeting, he said, where is al-Qaeda? And the answer was largely in Pakistan. And he said, therefore, why are we devoting our resources to Afghanistan if we're trying to get al-Qaeda? And that's a coherent question. Now, however, General Mattis, and this is a news item which I think is very important and is largely missed in the United States as we are obsessed and consumed by our presidential crisis, seems to be elaborating a coherent policy, which is debatable. You may be opposed to it, but if the policy is we will try to defeat the Taliban, that at least is coherent. I'm not convinced that that is actually the case. I think most likely we are there to make sure that the government doesn't lose, recognizing that since this is fundamentally a Pashtun nationalist issue tied up with the Taliban and terrorism in Pakistan's ISI, victory short of an expense we're unwilling to pay is unlikely. But I think we will see a stronger support for the regime, since it has been slowly losing territory in recent years.
Zafar Mehdi, how does the Afghan government look at it? Does it have a say when Americans say we think the Taliban should not be part of the political solution and we think we are going to send more troops? What are the choices before Afghanistan?
Well, the popular opinion, if we talk about Afghanistan, it is the idea of sending more troops to Afghanistan. It's not going to help. Instead of sending more troops and complicating the situation further, what the people here, what the government here, what the stakeholders here, civil society here, what they want is that Trump administration and his NATO partners should rather pressurize Islamabad to act against militant groups who are acting against Afghanistan, who are having sanctuaries there, who are having support infrastructure there, who are having state patronage, like Afghan spy agency in after the blast last week. They mentioned that Haqqani network was behind this attack with the support of ISI. So the basic demand is, instead of sending more troops and complicating the situation further, because the frustration is so deep. You can recall President Ghani before elections, he said it's a wasteful war. And now since he's in power, and now he wants to send 5,000 more troops to prolong this war. The question basically everybody is asking is, are 5,000 more US troops or 3,000 more US troops going to do what more than 100,000 troops could not do? 300 US Marines, as you know, are already back in southern Helmand province, apparently to advise and assist Afghan forces. But what the perception on ground, what the opinion people, what people are thinking is that more boots on the ground will not bring peace to Afghanistan, and that's something we must all accept. To bring peace and stability to Afghanistan, it's important to address the core issues and find answers to key questions. As President Ghani said, at the multinational peace conference in Kabul the other day, it's important to build alliances in the region that will help the countries face this common threat of terrorism. Because peace in Afghanistan is obviously linked to peace and stability in the region. If Afghanistan is peaceful, then the whole region will be peaceful. So the point is, sending more troops may not be the best idea right now. What needs to be done is regional coordination, regional cooperation, and putting pressure on Pakistani government to act against those militant outfits which are based out of in Pakistan, the tribal belt of Pakistan, and which are attacking Afghanistan from there with full patronage of ISI and state government.
Glenn Carl, almost 5 months in power, Donald Trump hasn't really specified his policy on this region and on Afghanistan in particular. We saw that MOA being dropped in Afghanistan. We've seen these odd statements here and there, but nothing coherent coming out of Washington. So is there an appetite in America to re-engage with Afghanistan? How do we look at this?
I'm afraid Afghanistan has always been a victimized by everybody, all countries forever, and that is unlikely to change dramatically from the perspective of what the U.S. does there, despite General Mattis's efforts to bring debatable coherency, but nonetheless coherency to policy. Because of the paralysis and chaos crisis that the United States is living with the man in the Oval Office. I never thought as a 10-year-old boy watching the movie Frankenstein that I would actually be learning about Pakistani-Afghan politics. But in fact, the analogy or metaphor is perfect. And I long said to my Pakistani interlocutors, I wasn't the only one, that they were Dr. Frankenstein and they were creating a monster that was going to destroy them. Just as Frankenstein did the laboratory and Dr. Frankenstein himself. And the Pakistanis, continue to believe, and maybe it's just ISI, and the government can't control its intelligence service, this is debatable, that they have a strategic lever somehow through supporting the Taliban, weak Afghanistan, and terrorism. And it will destroy them as it has made Afghanistan dysfunctional.
Zafar Mehdi, my final question to you. There are also reports that India might be exploring a role militarily in Afghanistan. Is that advisable? Would that help?
Well, since Pakistan is trying its best to exert influence in Afghanistan, so India, being a major player in the region, has to step in, may not necessarily through sending more troops, but India has a role to play in kind of giving push to playing constructive role in facilitating peace in Afghanistan, because India has invested massively, as you said in the start. It has invested more than $2 billion, and its presence has also grown in terms of infrastructure, in terms of diplomacy, in terms of forward operations. And if you can recall, President Ghani, when he took over in 2014, he went out of his way to extend an olive branch to Pakistan and visited Islamabad before he went to New Delhi. That did raise few eyebrows in New Delhi, but since then, relations have worsened between Islamabad and Kabul with the spate of terror attacks. So now almost the divorce between Islamabad and Kabul is almost confirmed. So now is the ideal time for India to step in and seize this opportunity and step up its engagement in Afghanistan. It may not, I don't know about the troops they are sending, but What goes in India's favor is the goodwill they enjoy in Afghanistan. Because India has given its new parliament building, it has built Salma Dam, it has given cricket stadium, agriculture university in Kandahar province, it has built roads. So a lot of things which it has done. But Afghanistan has repeatedly asked India to increase military assistance, and last year India gave 4 military helicopters also. And India has also offered to repair 11 Soviet-made helicopters and at least seven transport aircraft. So which is like, India is playing its role. India has to play its role, which is fine. And also one more point I want to make is about the Chabhar port, which is in southeastern Iran. Pakistan uses Karachi port as a pressure tactic on Afghanistan because it blocks the way for Afghan traders to go to India. So once this Chabhar port becomes operational, the overwhelming dependence of Afghanistan on Karachi port will be reduced, and that will connect the both countries more closer, bring those two countries more closer. So I think that these are good signs for Afghanistan-India relations, and India has to step up and play a role in facilitating peace in Afghanistan, whether it's through forces or whether it's soft power.
As of now, of course, military intervention, if I may use that word, this is just reports. No one from the government has said it so far, and I'm completely out of time, so sorry for cutting you there. Zafar Mehdi, Glenn Carl, thank you very much for joining us this evening on Gravitas. We have to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Qatar crisis, and we have a very special guest waiting for you.